What are you lucky people? It's that time of the month again. It is wrap up and TBR time, and I think I'm a day late on this, but that's because I forgot that it was the month was changing. So my fault, sorry. Also, I've been a bit bad with videos generally this month. I'm behind on a couple of book reviews, so I apologise to my book group for that in the last review that I did. But apologies again. I will be catching up on that pretty soon. And I've got some other videos planned as well. But you know, it's summer and it's really nice, and I'm spending the evenings like outside in the pub, and yeah, I don't feel too bad about it. But anyway, with that said, there are a few books to get through. I stuck to my TBR mostly, but I did sneak in another book, which meant that I didn't get round to starting one of the books from my TBR last time. So I'm sure you're all massively disappointed about that, but you'll just have to live with it. Anyway, the first book that I read this month, or the first book that I finished this month anyway, was the second book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Hobb, The Mad Ship. So this is just brilliant. I'm absolutely loving this series. I'm absolutely loving all of Hobb's books that I've read so far. This is the fifth one that I've read this year. I've never read any of her stuff before, and I'll tell you what, it is brilliant. So it's epic fantasy. This one, it's got like a fantastic, like really unique sort of setting, concept, with these like magic talking ships. There's a lot of the sort of mystery that was set up in the first book being revealed in this one, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend that anyone who likes fantasy, if you haven't read Hobb, she's fast becoming one of my favourite fantasy authors, and yeah, I'm definitely going to be carrying on with this series. So like I say, this is book 2 of the Live Ship Traders trilogy, but this is the second trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings series, which is a longer series, which I think has like 16 or 17 books in it, which is great. That means I'm going to be reading them for ages. They're all massive thick ones, but I'm looking forward to that. Right, so the next book that I read in the month of... what month was it? July. The month of July. Was it July? July, yeah, the month of July. Oh, and by the way, like, I've done reviews for most of these, and I will be doing reviews for the other ones, so you can check them out if you want. But anyway, the second book I read was some historical fiction this time. It's Marathon by Christian Cameron, and Christian Cameron's one of my all-time favourite historical fiction authors. Like, him and Bernard Cornwell, like, really, they are well up there. And this is the second book in his Long War series, which is set during the Greco-Persian Wars. So we're talking the 5th century BC, ancient Greece, the ancient Greek city-states fighting against the sort of global power at the time, which was the Persian Empire. And Marathon is one of the most famous, probably most important battles in the history of the Western world, really, and Christian Cameron does a fantastic job of portraying it. It's full of like action, adventure. The main character is great. It's written in the first person. Arimnestos of Plataea is the main character. He's great to read. He's got Christian Cameron's got a great understanding of the nuances of the politics of the time, and just a great handle on the ancient Greek culture. If you wanna, I mean, if you want to know what it was like to get into the mind of an ancient Greek aristocrat, basically, is what Arimnestos is, then, man, I think you'll struggle to find anything better than this. So, I mean, this is absolutely one of my favourite series ever. If you like historical fiction, read some Christian Cameron. Do yourself a favour. Right, the next book that I read this month... this was another good one. It's Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, which is the second book in his Gentleman Bastard sequence, which is like it's a fantasy series, but, well, I'll say that, it's like a crime fiction series, but set in a fantasy world. It's got some really great characters. The two main characters, Locke and Jean, are fantastic to read. I gotta say, I didn't think this quite scaled the heights of the first book in the series, The Lies of Loch Namora, that's called. But it was still a really enjoyable read, and it's got pirates, and if it's got pirates in, then that automatically puts it up a couple of rankings in my imaginary ranking system. So I think, if you have read The Lies of Loch Namora, you'll definitely enjoy this. You probably could read this as a book all on its own anyway, because it's quite episodic. It doesn't. You don't have to know about all the events of the first book to read it, but I would definitely recommend starting with The Lies of Loch Namora, just so you get an idea of how good Scott Lynch can be. Because this was, like I say, it's still good, just not quite as good. You can see really. I'll go into more detail in my review. You can check that out if you want. And the last book that I finished this month was not on my. This was not on my TBR. This was the sort of one that I just decided that I really wanted to read while I was on holiday. Basically, it is the second book in Memory, Sorrow and Thorn by Tad Williams. It's called Stone of Farewell, and this is just a classic fantasy series. I think this book was published maybe 1990. The first one was the end of the 80s. 1990. This was published. It's exactly what you would expect from classic epic fantasy. Heavily influenced by Tolkien, heavily influenced by Western mythology, all kinds of different Western mythologies, Western history as well, like Western European history anyway. And although, as with the first book in the series, it's bang full of tropes, but I don't mind that. I think that Tad Williams, he deals with the tropes that he is writing really intelligently, and I wouldn't say he plays with them particularly, but if you want to just see an example of how to write classic fantasy tropes well, go no further than Tad Williams. I've not read any of his other stuff, but certainly this series, Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, really great stuff if you like your traditional fantasy. Right, so that's all the physical books that I read this month. Now, I did have like a really good month for audiobooks, but a lot of them were non-fiction. I've been listening to loads of non-fiction audiobooks, so I'm not really going to go into them too much. But what I would say is, if you do like your non-fiction, I've been listening to a lot of the Great Courses. So they do like a bunch of different lecture series. I've been listening to a lot of their history lectures, and they've been fantastic. And also there's another series of lectures, the Modern Scholar series, and they do a whole variety of stuff as well. I listened to a great series of lectures by a professor called Professor something Drought, I think his name is, and he does an entire series of lectures on reading fantasy, the fantasy genre. So if you like reading fantasy, I recommend checking that out. I wouldn't say, he talks a lot about Tolkien, and a lot of it is really, he doesn't talk too much about modern fantasy, but it's very interesting nonetheless. But in terms of the fiction that I've been reading, listening to on audiobook this month, I said that I was like in my TBR for last month that we're going to listen to some more Joe Abercrombie, and I did that. So I haven't got the physical copy of this, so I'm just reading off my notebook here. So I listened to Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. Now, Joe Abercrombie writes grimdark fantasy. He's most famous, I guess, for the First Law trilogy, which is brilliant. Yeah, that's really great. Highly recommend checking that out. And Best Served Cold is set in the same world as the First Law trilogy. It's a standalone novel. It's got some of the minor characters from the First Law trilogy appear in this one as major characters, and then there's a bunch of new characters in there as well. And yeah, it was really, I thought it was more of the same of the First Law trilogy, just with different characters, and that is by no means a bad thing. It was a very enjoyable book to listen to. It's basically a revenge story, as you could probably guess from the title. But as with all of Joe Abercrombie's writing, the character work was just outstanding. I wouldn't say there's much that that makes him stand out in terms of like his writing style, or you know, or his plotting or other aspects of his writing, but you will not get many better in the fantasy genre at writing characters than Joe Abercrombie. So just for that, it's definitely worth reading for me. There are, I think, 3 more standalone novels set in the world of the First Law. And I do actually have them all, but I didn't get around to listening to them this month. But Best Served Cold, yeah, that was a good listen. The next book that I listened to on audiobook, I do actually have a physical copy of it, and that is The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, which is like classic Arthurian fantasy. The first in the classic Merlin trilogy, it says here, although actually I believe there are 5 books in the series. I think it was originally a trilogy, and then she wrote like a 4th one, and to sort of round it off, and then the 5th one apparently is a bit rubbish. But the Merlin trilogy by Mary Stewart here, this is, I really wanted to read this because from my understanding this is one of the first sort of series set, this is one of the first Arthurian series that really tries to ground itself in the historical context of the sort of 5th, 6th century, which is the kind of time that King Arthur may or, you know, may not have been around, you know, if he's not just a legendary figure. I personally think that there's probably someone, whether his name was Arthur or whether he did all the stuff that is talked about. I may well do a video on King Arthur at some point soon, by the way. But yeah, this really takes out a lot of the sort of magical, fantastical elements that you do get in a lot of Arthurian literature, and as I say, grounds it in a solid historical context. And that actually is my favourite approach for an Arthurian series. Don't get me wrong, I do like the sort of more fantasy heavy Arthurian stuff, but I really like the sort of the more realistic you know, adaptations of the legend, because for me the 5th and 6th century in Britain, that's a super interesting time anyway. You know, the whole island is in flux, the Romans have left, you've got Germanic culture coming in from the east, you've got Romano-British culture holding on in the west, you've got all sorts of stuff going on. It's a super interesting time, and yeah, I did enjoy this. I'm not so much of a fan of seeing it from Merlin's point of view, to be honest. Merlin's not my favourite character in the series, in the sort of Arthurian you know, legends and whatever, but that is purely a personal thing. But I did really enjoy this, and I'm carrying on with it at the moment actually, so well, I'll talk about that more later. But yeah, so The Crystal Cave is the first one, and if you like King Arthur, then yeah, this is actually, yeah, you're definitely going to like this, I would have thought. The next book that I listened to was, I don't have a physical copy of, but it's one that I've been looking forward to listening to or reading or whatever for ages, and that's by Bernard Cornwell, who, as you will know if you've watched his channel at all, is one of my favourite authors. I've already talked about him once in this video, haven't I? And the book that I listened to was War of the Wolf, which is the latest entry in the Last Kingdom series, and it was the only one of the ones that I hadn't read yet. And I wouldn't say that it's the strongest book in the series particularly. I think there's a bit, he's gone for a bit of a, you know, it follows the typical, you know, sort of plot that you get in the series. You know, Uhtred, Vikings, has to deal with a Viking bad guy. There's but he's torn because, you know, he likes the Vikings, and there's lots of political manoeuvring and then some big battles. So yeah, classic Last Kingdom stuff there. I thought that his use of the sort of, well, he called it the Ulfhednar, like, which are, you know, Viking wolf warriors, berserkers he portrays them as in this book, felt a little bit gimmicky. Didn't really see the need for it, or I didn't like how it was really incorporated into the story. You know, they've never been mentioned before in the series, and then suddenly they're this big scary thing. But having said that, classic Uhtred moments, classic Finnan moments. You know, if you read the series, they're two of the main characters. Well, Uhtred is the main character, Finnan is his like right-hand man. And yeah, it was an interesting experience listening to it rather than reading it, and actually hearing these characters, you know, with real voices. The voices weren't what I was expecting particularly, but they were really good. I actually thought that the narration was really good, the voice acting was really good. And even though, like I say, it's probably not one of the strongest books in the series, I still really enjoyed it. I love this series, I love Bernard Cornwell's writing, I love Uhtred, the main character in the series, so, I mean, of course, I'm going to enjoy it. The next book that I listened to, I do have a physical copy of, and that was Hood by Stephen Lawhead. And this is the first book in the King Raven trilogy, which I've read before, so this was a reread for me, really. And this is an adaptation of the legend of Robin Hood, as you may be able to guess from the cover and the title. But it sets it in Wales rather than... Because, right, so Robin Hood, Sherwood Forest, yes. Sherwood Forest is like a north of Nottinghamshire at the moment. But it's much bigger in the medieval period. Obviously, we've cut down a bunch of trees since then. But this, yeah, like I say, this sets it in Wales. And he gives some, like... There's actually like a bit of an essay at the end about... why he set, I say an essay, you know, it's a few pages, about why he set it in Wales, and he puts forward some really interesting points about that. So, because, you know, Robin Hood's, in the, you know, the earliest mentions of Robin Hood in, you know, historically, don't actually associate him necessarily with Sherwood Forest, and also a load of the characters in the Robin Hood legend that we're used to don't come in until much later. You know, the Sheriff of Nottingham, Maid Marian, like, and all these characters don't come into the legend until much later. So, as with the sort of Mary Stewart book that I was talking about, that tries to put King Arthur into a real historical setting, same thing here, really, with the Robin Hood legend. And yeah, I really like it. I think this is, because Stephen Lawhead, right, he's a classic fantasy writer, well, historical fantasy writer. He did a big series, 6-book series on, well, 5 books and a standalone about King Arthur. He's done this Robin Hood trilogy as well. I'd say the Robin Hood trilogy, or the King Raven trilogy it's called, is certainly the stronger one. Both are good. This is the stronger one. And I really enjoy it when you get these legends that are put into a grounded historical context. That really appeals to me. So yeah, enjoyable listen for sure. Right, so that's all the books that I have read / or at least it's all the fiction books. Like I say, I've been reading an awful lot of non-fiction this month. But in terms of what I'm currently reading, this was on my TBR for last month, but I've only just got around to it. I literally am gonna start this today, and that is Stormfront by Jim Butcher. It's the first book in the Dresden Files. I think it's like a fantasy take on the crime noir genre, from what I understand. And I've been recommended this by one of my viewers on one of my videos. Asked whether I'd read it, saw it the next day in a charity shop, picked it up, and yeah, I'm quite looking forward to trying this out, because I've seen some other booktubers review it and really like it. So I'm interested. It's not. I don't normally read anything in the sort of crime noir genre. I don't really read any urban fantasy normally, so it's kind of a bit slightly out of my comfort zone. It'll be interesting to see whether I enjoy that or not. And in terms of what I'm currently listening to audiobook wise, it's The Hollow Hills by Mary Stewart, which is the second book in the Merlin trilogy that I talked about. And yeah, I mean, like, so far, I don't know how far I'm into it, maybe halfway through it or something, and yeah, I'm enjoying it just as much as the first one. Really, it's just like an extension of the first. This trilogy, it's not like individual books, it's just, yeah, it's one big story, basically. I mean, I think the thing is with the King Arthur legends, you know, we know what happens, so there's no surprises in it. It's just interesting to see someone's take on the legend, you know what I mean? And when this was written, this is a very original take. We've seen all sorts of gritty historical you know, adaptations of the King Arthur legend since then. But this was the first, and it's a good one. It is a good one. Right, so moving on to my TBR for the month of... I'm terrible at this. August, for the month of August. The first one, once I finished the Dresden Files, the Stormfront, Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. This finishes off the Live Ship Traders trilogy. It's massive. How many pages are we looking at here? It's another 900 page beast of a book. But I am really looking forward to this. Man, I wish it was twice that length, because I know it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to finding out about all the different mysteries that she set up throughout the first books. I want to see how the characters end up like reaching some kind of resolution to their arcs. I love Robin Hobb's writing. Can't wait to get onto this. Next up, we've got another continuation of a series. It is going to be the third book in the Long War series by Christian Cameron, Poseidon Spear. This one is a bit of a... I've read this series before, so you know I know what happens. This one is I wouldn't say this is the strongest book in the series. This is slightly different to the rest of the books. Basically, in the historical record, he's got a gap of, like Christian Cameron has got a gap of a few years when not a lot happens in ancient Greece in terms of the Greco-Persian Wars. And he basically fills this gap by just making up a story about Arimnestos of Plataea, the main character in this series, going on like a ocean voyage, like a long ocean voyage that has a lot of elements of the Odyssey in it. So while it was interesting in that sense to see Cameron's take on that and how he brings that into the book, it's not so much about the Greco-Persian Wars as the rest of the series, and for me that's the interesting part of it. But his writing is still fantastic, and I do like a good maritime adventure anyway. So yeah, the third book in that. I think there's 6 books in the series in total. I'm going to do a reread of the whole series. And third one is going to be the third book, or the third book on my TBR is going to be the third book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which is called The Republic of Thieves, again by Scott Lynch there. So I'm very interested to see whether Scott Lynch manages to regain the heights that he managed to reach in the Lies of Loch Lamora, because as I say, I thought there was just a slight downturn in the second book. It was still very good, just not as good as the Lies of Loch Lamora though. I don't really know what happens in this one. I think that we're going to, well, according to the blurb, we're going to meet up with some bad guys from the first book, and also there's a bit of an issue hanging over from the second book that wasn't resolved at the end of that, which I won't go into, I don't want to spoil it. So yeah, still stuff for Locke and Jean to deal with from that. But yeah, apart from that, it's going to be a bit of a surprise for me. I'm hoping that it is as good as the Lies of Loch Lamora. I mean, come on, Scott, you can do it. But right, yeah, so that is the wrap up and TBR for July, August, yeah. Why am I so bad with the months? But anyway, so if you've read any of them, then please let me know what you think, but don't spoil any of the ones on TBR, because apart from Poseidon Spear, if you've read that, I've read that before, but I haven't read the other two. Yeah, if you've got any opinions for me on any of the books that I have read or listened to, or if you've got any recommendations for me based on that, I'd love to hear them. Put them down in the comments. Other than that, hopefully I can be a bit better with videos this month, although I wouldn't bet on it because the weather is really nice, the evenings are really long, and it is nice sitting in the pub in the evenings at the moment. But I'll do my best. Also, I've got a new camera. Is it better? So yeah, let me know if the camera's any better. But yeah, apart from that, I guess goodbye, and I'll see you for the next video, which will probably be a review of Stone of Farewell, because I need to catch up on my reviews. Right, bye.